ethnic groups in the city. So we decided to start to think how do we understand that. For that, we've been working for 3 years. We've been working in different territories in Colombia, and we've been working with different stakeholders. I will tell you after, but for now, the main aspect is that we finally, after 3 years, got like the main objective of this ICH in urban context program we have in Colombia, and we want to generate, and we have to enhance, and we have to safeguard ICH through one tool, and it's like the World Charter for the Right to the City we have, and through that and with the convention we want to promote sustainable development. How we do that? For that we thought about two main aspects. The first one is the right to the city, so we empower people and we recognize different communities. They have the right to the city through their cultural ways of life, through their own ICH, but also we thought about how do we manage it in the relationship with the space. Let's say that we had some ICH expressions happening in the city, for example, Carnival of Barranquilla, which you all know, but when we were looking at the safeguard plans, it was somehow in the air. We were never talking about the physical space or the city where this was happening. We were just talking about the expression as it happened in Barranquilla or in Bogota or in Cali or in any other city. So in that sense, we decided to make a connection between the urban management plans and the urban planning aspects in the cities with the safeguarding tools for ICH. And that's when we found we needed to create and to take the convention beyond with the tools we had already in our policy, and to try to think about connecting this ICH with physical space and the planning. So finally we could, the same as we sometimes protect the historic buildings, historic palaces, historic blocks in the city, we could also safeguard traditional practices and ICH practices in the city through the space. So maybe if we have like a traditional place where something is happening, although the building is not historical building, is not like covered by another convention or something, we will protect this place just because of the practices we have inside, not because of the importance of the architecture. For example, in the downtown, we have like a traditional markets road where you can see the architecture is not really something important, but the practice itself and the tradition of this place is really important for the city and for the people living in Bogota, but also for people from Bogota, but people who's been being in Bogota for many, many years, with migrants as well for their own markets. So in that sense, we were working in these urban planning management plans, safeguarding ICH practices, and creating new tools for that.
So, thank you, Juliana. So one of the main aspects of this ICH in Urban Context program that we are applying here in Colombia is the ICH in Urban Context Toolbox, which is a set of methodological guidelines and activities to promote the participative construction of both knowledge on ICH in urban context and ways of planning for the future to achieve the sustainability of those cultural practices that are linked to urban sustainability and to a better lifestyle in urban context. Basically, the toolbox contains a set of guidelines and recommendations so you can promote community-based activities, especially to reflect upon territorial aspects and their relation towards ICH stakeholders, ICH spaces, and ICH processes that must be safeguarded. The expected results of this toolbox are generating urban context memory, also collective agreements, and creating enhanced capacities for ICH identification. The way that we work towards creating this toolbox and guidelines, it was through a national participative program in which we did a set of workshops, we did a set of pilot projects, we also did an ICH in Urban Context Forum in Colombia, in which we invited international experts and also national stakeholders and UNESCO with the participation of the Secretariat of UNESCO in order to generate a dialogue that would enhance the capacities of this toolbox in order to help communities and public institutions in their efforts to safeguard ICH in urban contexts. And just to end, the way that we have strived so there's more civil society engagement with this toolbox is through a call for projects. So different communities and different ICH groups that are interested in ICH in urban context can work with the toolbox. We started this year in 2019. We started with 3 grants, each for $7,000 for this ICH groups, so they could present their projects. We had 16 projects presented in Colombia. So for the first time that this call for projects was launched, it was relatively successful. And the time is up, so.
Okay, I will just steal 15 seconds to say 2 important things. One is, well, thank you to Singapore for opening this space, because we are one of the very first countries working on this new tool, and we are very happy to have more countries working on that. And Singapore is actually like, it's really important ICH in urban context for Singapore. And the second is like, well, we have 10 minutes. It's been very fast, our presentation here, but on Friday at midday, we will have side event dedicated to ICH in urban context, where we will explain in a broader way the toolbox and what we have been doing all these years. Thank you so much.
Just a little, Friday afternoon at Hall N, that doesn't exist in English, N-O. Eñe it just exists in Spanish. So that's the hall where we're going to have the side event.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, and it was very interesting to hear from you, because we can learn from the Colombian experience and your cultural policies, and this toolbox I also find very interesting, and I want to know more about this afterwards. And but without much further ado, I will now give the floor to Kirk here, my neighbor from Singapore, and he's going to do his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be able to share our experiences from Singapore. We're actually very young to the convention. We only ratified the convention last year, so we are here to also share, but also to learn from every one of you. To start my presentation, I'd just like to highlight that throughout the history of humanity, the population of people have largely been in rural areas, but that has dramatically changed in the last 100 to 200 years. And today, more than half the world's population lives in urban areas, and we project that by 2050, 68% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. Singapore is a largely urban area. We're a very small country, 720 square kilometers, with a population of 5.7 million. That makes us to be one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And these are some of the pictures that you see about scenes, very high-rise buildings and in an urban context. The history of Singapore has very much been based on trade in the development and growth of Singapore. With that trade and across regions, across international countries, it has also resulted in a lot of migration of people. And today we have a very multicultural society and very diverse cultural practices. The major ethnic groups descend from Chinese, Malay, India, and there are also many other smaller ethnic groups in Singapore. So that creates a very vibrant multicultural ICH in Singapore that we all enjoy. And just like to highlight a few examples that can be found in Singapore. One is hawker culture. We really call it an everyday part of our life. It involves what we call hawkers who prepare hawker food, and also people who dine in cultural spaces that we call hawker centers. We call them community dining rooms because these fulfill very important social functions of bring people together to interact regardless of backgrounds, regardless of social class, and that is important to creating a social cohesion among people. How this ICH has changed is also it has changed with the country's development. What used to be found on the streets have been changed, and today we find in urban covered shelters that you see in the pictures here. Another way that ICS has changed in Singapore is the way we celebrate festivals. It has adapted to the urban context. We have many festivals because of the different ethnic groups that can be found in Singapore. And many of these celebratory events can actually be found in and held in historic urban precincts in Singapore. And it's a way to also show that, you know, ICH and the physical, the tangible heritage have very strong links with one another. In Singapore, we face many challenges. I'll just highlight a few in terms of urbanization and development over time. Singapore has rapidly urbanized in the last 50 years. Globalization, technology, very rapid change in lifestyle. We also face a very rapidly aging population. And all these factors create challenges for us when we look at the transmission of ICH to the next generation. It's because of these challenges that we, at the Heritage Board, look at a way to develop a holistic plan for heritage. It's the first such master plan for heritage in Singapore. It covers all the different dimensions of heritage, both monuments, spaces, as well as ICH as well. And it was developed in consultation with Singaporeans, whether it's with students, experts, practitioners, and members of the public. They all had a chance to be consulted to learn about the plan and to give their views. And I'll just share some of the ICH efforts that we have put in place since the plan. Shortly after ratifying the convention, we started the inventory. We decided to do a largely web-based inventory, complete with videos, images, as well as statements and experiences of practitioners. And we disseminate this information through various platforms, through publications, conferences, through even social media, because reaching out to the younger generation is a very important part of our work. In Singapore, many of our young people are, I think, likewise in many countries and cities, they are all glued to their mobile phones and laptops, so it's important to find a medium to reach out to them. We are not alone in the use of social media. Many of the community groups are also very active in looking at ways to reach out and promote awareness of ICH. These are just some examples, ranging from Instagram to Facebook, ways that they highlight their festivals and also food traditions as well. Working with communities is a very important part of our work. At the NHB, we have many partnerships with universities, community groups, down to individuals, as well as other government agencies to look at how do we safeguard ICH. One of the ways that we work with communities and universities is to support their many efforts. So the picture on the left, for example, is a grant that we gave to the university to support the research and documentation of a festival in Singapore. So the university and the university students were involved in the field work to document the practice, and the documentation work feeds back into the inventory that we developed. Picture on the left is one of the example of a community program that the community groups are running by themselves. Also, these are supported by us, and we are also exploring new ways of supporting practitioners. By early next year, we will be giving our award scheme to raise the profile of ICH practitioners in Singapore, and award recipients of the ICH award will also be provided with grants to support the transmission of ICH. The last part of my presentation will touch a bit about safeguarding of ICH in historic precincts. We have managed to preserve many historic precincts despite our small land capacity, but at the same time, we are also exploring how do we retain the ICH that's associated with these spaces, because like many cities, such spaces are affected by development, by gentrification. There's potential risk of traditional trades and businesses being displaced, for example. So it's important for us to work with stakeholders to see how do we safeguard ICH and also at the same time promote both the physical, tangible heritage and also ICH. So there are many ways that we have been working on this. I'll just highlight a few examples. The two pictures on the left is from this, what we call a community gallery. It's Kreta Ayer Heritage Gallery. So it's a space that's found within a historic part of Singapore called Chinatown. And it's the community decided to showcase exhibitions and programs related to the ICH that they want to showcase, like, for example, Chinese opera or Chinese puppetry, because this was a precinct that has a very strong Chinese influence. So the community had a hand in getting and reaching out to their own members to ask for donations of photographs or for artifacts, for even costumes. And they're also involved in running, for example, workshops that you see in the bottom left picture. So the picture on the, if I can get the screen to work, the picture on the left, top left, is a community curated exhibition at our Indian Heritage Center. The exhibition actually features a small subgroup of the Indian community called the Chiti Malacca. So the community was actively involved in curating the exhibition, even documenting their own food recipes and sharing the recipes with the rest of the people. And again, annually we hold what we call a cultural festival, heritage festivals. And these are platforms, festivals that many of the community groups themselves come together to perform, to have a chance to show their performing arts, to show their crafts to the people. So in summary, I'd just like to reiterate that cities are really the urban centers where high concentrations of people exist, and also diverse communities living in close proximity with one another. There are many strong links between the cities in terms of the urban tangible heritage as well as ICH. And we believe that ICH plays a very important role in today's interconnected world, affected by rapid change, whether it's in lifestyle, technology, physical change, as well as we are increasingly seeing around the world issues of division, potential tensions between different ethnic groups, and I think ICH has an important role to play in this. And we have to work together across different stakeholder groups, whether it's from us as a government organization, working with NGOs, community groups, and individuals, tackle the many challenges that we face in addressing this ICH in urban context. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation, and thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I was, of course, a bit attracted to your story about this historic precincts, and I was privileged a few weeks ago to have a presentation myself in Singapore during a conference on approximately the same topic, and then I was talking about a city district in The Hague, that is called Little India, and because of its Indian presence over there. And when I was in Singapore, I noticed that we also shared this, that there's also a Little India in Singapore. So because of this process of migration, we have Little Indias everywhere almost, and on this we could also share experiences. So once again, without much further ado, I will give the floor to Frida, and perhaps it's a bit unusual because we have divided it into regions, as is the practice, of course, here during these UNESCO meetings. And she will start with, she comes from region 1, Paris, but she is living in Mexico, and she will be talking about the Mexican diaspora in Paris. So Europe is now represented by someone from Mexico. This is also about diversity, I think. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really sorry because English is not really in my cultural heritage, so I will speak in French. I'm really sorry. Le travail de l'association Île du Monde se passe à Paris. Nous sommes nés en 2012 et l'objectif principal de l'association, c'est travailler avec les communautés migrantes qui sont installées dans la région parisienne. Et nous sommes une équipe pluridisciplinaire et multiculturelle, c'est-à-dire que tous les membres de l'association, nous sommes nous-mêmes migrants avec différentes nationalités, italiens, espagnols, mexicains, français. Et nous travaillons depuis 2013 en partenariat avec le ministère de la Culture pour la réalisation des fiches de l'inventaire français. Et notre principal souci, objectif, c'est de réussir à rendre visible et à donner un nom à ce patrimoine qui peut se reproduire en dehors de son contexte d'origine. Nous avons souvent utilisé la notion de patrimoine translocal, qu'on a repris de l'anthropologue Chiara Bortolotto, une anthropologue italienne, pour justement caractériser ces pratiques qui sont en dehors d'un seul espace, qui peuvent être multisituées. On peut parler également d'un patrimoine diasporique, qui est un mouvement, qui n'est pas seulement dans un seul territoire. pour travailler avec les différentes communautés qui sont installées à Paris et sa région, nous avons travaillé sur une certaine méthodologie à partir de laquelle nous avons défini 4 indicateurs pour décider sur quelles pratiques nous allions porter notre attention. D'abord, c'est la présence stable et avec une certaine durée des communautés dans le lieu d'installation, c'est-à-dire que nous ne travaillons pas avec l'arrivée des migrants nouveaux, on s'intéresse aux communautés de longue durée dans le pays de destination. Ensuite, nous observons qu'il y ait vraiment un intérêt et une tentative de répéter un certain élément patrimonial. Bien sûr, on s'intéresse à l'histoire de l'élément qu'on voudrait patrimonialiser, c'est-à-dire nous aimons regarder à la fois la filiation avec la culture d'origine, mais sans perdre de vue les adaptations, les transformations que ces pratiques vivent à cause de la migration. Et bien sûr, il est très important de travailler avec des communautés qui sont intéressées de transmettre. Nous savons que ces communautés qui s'installent de longue durée dans les pays de destination, il y a une nouvelle génération qui naît dans ces pays et il faut qu'il y ait un souci de transmettre à cette nouvelle génération. Le travail que l'association a réalisé... Oui. Merci. Nous avons réalisé 13 fiches pour l'inventaire du PCI français, toutes d'origine étrangère, le lavage de la Madeleine avec la communauté brésilienne, la fête du printemps Nouvel An chinois de la communauté chinoise asiatique, les chants polyphoniques géorgiens. Nous avons travaillé également sur l'art du griot de l'Empire mandingue. Ensuite, on a travaillé la danse du lion comme un art martial, la communauté Vaisaki, la coiffure africaine, un travail outre-Atlantique en Guyane française, le tembe des Bushinengue, les danses géorgiennes, le Norus, Nouvel An perse, le fado des Portugais et en ce moment la danse péruvienne de la communauté péruvienne et le Nouvel An berbère. D'autres projets que nous réalisons, c'est toujours réaliser en plus de la fiche écrite ethnographique des petites vidéos documentaires qui nous permettent de faire une plus large diffusion, de rendre aussi aux communautés un objet avec lequel pouvoir partager ce patrimoine. Et en parallèle, nous créons des ateliers d'identification de savoir dans l'objectif de créer des voies d'insertion pour les migrants. On peut parler par exemple de l'exemple de la coiffure africaine, qui est un métier, un savoir que les gens développent en France, mais qui n'est pas forcément reconnu par la société française. Donc il nous intéresse d'identifier des savoirs qui pourraient devenir des voies d'insertion dans les sociétés de destination. Nous avons également créé des projets d'intégration sociale, un projet qui s'est appelé Rencontre Cuisine, dans laquelle nous invitions des personnes à partager un savoir-faire culinaire à partir d'une plateforme d'échange où les personnes pouvaient s'inscrire pour aller manger japonais, chinois, vietnamien, etc. Et nous fonctionnons également comme un groupe de conseil. En ce moment, l'association réalise un inventaire du PCI à l'île de la Guadeloupe. J'ai plus de temps. Et nous faisons aussi des recherches, un peu de diffusion. Et nous pensons que l'important du PCI dans le contexte urbain, c'est d'abord parce qu'il y a beaucoup de pratiques qui se présentent comme des fêtes et des rites, la possibilité de s'approprier l'espace urbain, donc d'être dans la rue, ce que disait notre collègue colombienne, l'importance de penser les lieux du PCI dans la ville, qui constituent une offre culturelle, une offre touristique. Aussi les espaces d'apprentissage, que les gens puissent partager leur savoir au sein d'ateliers, des maisons de la culture, des espaces où d'autres personnes vont s'intéresser, par exemple les arts martiaux asiatiques ou le fado, l'apprentissage de la guitare fado. Et voilà, ce que je vous ai déjà dit sur les métiers liés aux traditions comme une possibilité d'insertion professionnelle. Merci beaucoup. 5 minutes.
Et merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Well, my French is not as well as it used to be, but I could follow well your argument, and of course I saw quite a few similarities. So the Chinese New Year is also celebrated, of course, in Rotterdam and all cities of the world, I think. So thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so, well, once again, a little change of the program, because I was telling you about my colleague, Maarschip, who has dislocated his shoulder, and he went to hospital, and, but now he's already present here. So, I think, yes, a big applause is in due order, and he told me just now that, okay, I'm here, so I can do my presentation, so why not? So, I will give him the floor. The slides are already on the screen. We only need... Okay. So, Mark, good luck. Everyone is in favor of you because of your misfortune, and so you cannot do anything wrong, I think.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I nearly made it, but since I'm here, I will just give the presentation. I will talk a little bit about the safeguarding issues of the Hindustani community in, well, we will call it a city in the Netherlands, but it's quite small. It's in Arnhem, the place where our office is. And the Hindustani are quite a special group of immigrants in the Netherlands. They moved from India to Suriname in the 19th century after the slavery was abolished, and the Dutch needed a new force of labor, and the Hindustani came from India, and after the independence of Suriname in 1975, a big group of Hindustani moved to the Netherlands. And some of them moved to Arnhem, which is, well, quite a small city. They have 160,000 inhabitants. And in the city district of Malburgen, which is even smaller, of course, with only 15,000 inhabitants, there are 120 nationalities living. And there are some challenges in this neighborhood, like a lack of social cohesion, loneliness, high level of unemployment, and language deficiency. And in general, we would say, at least the people that I spoke to in Arnhem, that it's quite a segregated city compared to, for example, Rotterdam, where you see more mixtures of cultures living together. In Arnhem, most people from different ethnicities just, well, do their things with their own group. And my case is about the Hindustanis that are living there. They are organized in a small working group called Ashna, and that consists of mainly elderly people who were who immigrated from Suriname. So they are now mainly above 60, 70 years old. And they have weekly Friday night activities. For example, they have dinners, lectures about the Hindustani culture, but also music night or card games. And they also organize big events like Holi and Diwali. But they also have some safeguarding issues. And one of these issues has to do with demographics. Well, the amount of Hindustanis in the Netherlands is quite small. It's only 1%. That's out of a population of 17 million, there are 160,000 Hindustani. And in Suriname, where they came from, at least in the 1970s, they consist of only almost 25% of the population. So they are a bigger proportion of the inhabitants of Suriname. And therefore, in Suriname, celebrations like Holi or Diwali are more an integral part of the daily life. They are celebrated on the streets in Suriname. And in the Netherlands, well, we also have big events, but that are events like King's Day. So one of the problems is that people are not really celebrating these intangible heritage as a group on the streets. And it's back for me. And I had an interview with the elderly people from this working group, Ashna, and they explained some of the safeguarding issues to me. They explained that the younger generation, so their children and their grandchildren, are not really that much interested anymore in the intangible cultural heritage of the Hindustani. And one of the reasons is that they are a little bit westernized. So they grow up in the Netherlands, and they celebrate King's Day and other intangible heritage that is more common to celebrate on the streets. And therefore also they have a lack of knowledge about their intangible cultural heritage of their parents. Well, those elderly people feel that this is a problem because they want to safeguard it for the next generation. So how to do this is the question. Well, one of the most important things for them to safeguard the intangible cultural heritage is their community center. They have a community center, and in this community center they celebrate the events that I mentioned. And this is especially important because one of the elderly persons explained to me that when they celebrate Holi in their houses, then their children are, well, they like it a bit, but they are not really very enthusiastic about the celebrations. But when they celebrate it as a community, in the community center, they feel really a sense of community, belonging to the Hindustani community. And then they are more enthusiastic about also celebrate it in the future. So that's important for a start, the community center. And I also interviewed one of the younger persons that is a member of this ASHNA working group. And she explained that it might be helpful to organize more youth-friendly events. For example, dance or DJ nights. And that can be a step towards other forms of the Hindustani heritage. And for her, it was also important that the heritage is shown. For example, the working group has a Facebook page. But if you look into the page, then you see that the last post was in September 2017. So a lot of people don't know about the events that are organized, and especially the younger generation. So this girl, she said, well, I can revive this Facebook page and try to make it more attractive for the younger generation. So this is in a process now. And another point, in my conversation with her, I pointed out that in Rotterdam, a bigger city in the Netherlands, the Hindustani community also organizes a lot of events, and she was not aware of that. So one of the safeguarding things could be to have a bigger community of the Hindustani community in the Netherlands, that they tell each other about the events. And well, one big step was already made, because the group in Rotterdam recently registered the Holi and Diwali in the network of the intangible heritage in the Netherlands. So that is, I think, a big step towards safeguarding it. And hopefully that is a step into a more diverse intangible heritage in the Netherlands. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. If I hadn't told the audience that you had, in a way, lost your arm, then no one would have noticed it, I think. So thank you very much for your presentation. And so we're now going to Asia, and we have two presenters from Asia, and starting with Mona Lisa. So a nice, well, not a nice Nepalese or Indian name, I think, but you've once explained to me how it came about that your father called you Mona Lisa, but I give you the floor. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for the floor. My presentation is from the case studies from Nepal. I work for the UNESCO chair in Portugal, but this is also the part of the ongoing research. It's a traditional practice, ancient settlement and urbanization, the case from Kathmandu Valley. Just to give the idea of Kathmandu Valley, it's like Kathmandu Valley has always been the cultural hub, not in case of the monuments and temples and stupas everywhere you can find, but also the living traditional practices. Like every day, there is not a single day that goes without any festivals or events. And we can truly say that this city is designed for the God, people, and dead, because they are all interconnected. And the squares we see, the rest houses we see, they are all the platform to conduct this event. And because most of the things are performed in the outside, not only in the private house. This used to be like a skyline of Kathmandu Valley. This was probably from the 70s or 60s. I don't have the exact date. And we can see these monuments like and the background of the hill. And the temples were mostly damaged in the 2015 earthquake. Some were totally collapsed, some were partially damaged, some were like had a huge impact. So now is like to give a political idea of Kathmandu is like until the 50s, like Kathmandu, Nepal was closed because of the political situation. And but in the after 50s, we saw a huge development. Like I quoted the development because our idea of the development has always been the concrete buildings, wider roads. And you know, with the more vehicles, and if it's like a new technology, then it's always like a development. So that was what happened. And yeah, these pictures, I think, speaks more than my words. It has just been like 90 years apart, the valley. You can see how it has changed. This was the same place, 90 years apart, more or less. It's a stupa, one of the biggest stupa of Kathmandu Valley, and this is what we are is now. So you can see how city have changed. And this happened in the last few decades, like from 80s, you know, the massive development happened. And now is there like Kathmandu is like it's actually turning into the concrete jungle. No. Yeah. And the impact we can see is in the tangible and intangible heritage. And the most, we call it development, like, this is like, you can see in the government policy of widening the road. And there is a policy like the road must be at least 20 feet wide enough so that the emergency vehicle could pass by. And this happened like more after the earthquake of 2015, because if something happens and you need a vehicle to pass by, I don't know how to describe this. But still in this case, there are like traditional practices. And when the wide road expansion drive takes place, it doesn't matter if it's the houses are 100 years or 200 years old, the traditional houses, they are demolished because they are against the new law of the government, against the new policy of the government. And even the stupas and the temples, they are being demolished. But the traditional practices, they are still continue. Like you can see, some of them are like a private, the personal social activities, but that takes place in the outside square and the streets, and some are for like a public event. Why I cannot go back? Yeah. And some of them are like a big chariot festival and these things. But the effect of development we can see is in the tangible more, but the intangible is even worse because this happens in the cyclic order, like once a year or once a whole week in the year. You know, these things are never seen in the everyday dynamics of the life, but the people who celebrate them, they can see it. The situation right now is like when the development plans are made, the policies are designed, they are never, the ICS are never taken into the consideration. You can see this, for you it seems like people are playing the traditional instrument, right? But it's not, it's playing the traditional instrument, but it's here. For them, it used to be like a place where they used to do it from 100 years back, or maybe even more than that. But now it's taken by the road. You can see this. There are even more like these things happening. But still, there is a ray of hope in case of the young people. The young people are coming more forward for like they have more campaigns and events to make aware of the things like demolishing things and things that's happening. People are coming into the groups, and they are into the safeguarding of their heritage. And you can see more people coming to these practices and festivals. And with all this like YouTube and Facebook things that's going on, you can see many people coming into the young people into the events. And especially this happened after the earthquake, because the people have this emotional attachment after the earthquake of 2015. It's like when people saw how the things that has been always there being destroyed in just few seconds. So there is still a hope, but there are a lot more things to be done. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mona Lisa, for your wonderful presentation.
I think I made in time.
Yes, you made in time.
Sorry.
And, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. 5 minutes, but well, I was extremely flabbergasted by your picture during your presentation, the Kathmandu Valley in the 20s and in now, and it was completely urbanized. So this is about urbanization, and all the same, these ICA's traditions were kept in a way and still vibrant in this community, and perhaps because it's so important to have a social fabric and supported by these traditions, I think. So you want to answer it, but there's no possibility for this, of course. So I want to pass on the mic to Ananya Bhattacharya, your neighbor from India. Well, we've talked a lot about Little India, and now we have perhaps Big India. So she comes from Kolkata, and also a city faced with many challenges, I think. Okay, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Albert. I'd like to thank the Singapore National Heritage Board, ICH NGO Forum, for organizing this important discussion, and Albert especially for giving me this opportunity. We'll now travel to Calcutta, and yes, all the problems which have been discussed are there, but I'd like to share some examples of how ICH is being used as a social and cultural capital for revival of the city. For those who are not aware, Calcutta is a huge city. We have a population of around 5 million in the core city and 15 million in the overall metropolitan area. The population density is something like 24,000 people per square kilometer. And it was the second city of the British Empire, so it has a very diverse population and very beautiful architecture from those years. It's a very young city, 300-year plus. And it has gone through a lot of turbulations, lot of migration, refugee problem, insurgency, loss of industry, unemployment. City is known for its poverty, the city of Mother Teresa. But it is the cultural capital of India and known for its joy. It's called the city of joy and warmth and friendliness. So I think, moment it's a people city, I think the critical aspect is the cultural spaces. So here are some photos for you to share. It's one of the iconic spaces, the Victoria Memorial. And these flags, it shows how ICH of various parts of settlements across the river Ganges were used to draw about stories of people, stories of life of people along the Ganges and also along the Thames. And these were like showcased. So I think that is one critical aspect whenever we are talking of cultural spaces, that we need to have a policy where it is not only about performance and showcasing, but how to make it a place for integration, for connection, for dialogue. Now, city, by virtue of being an urban space, has advantage of connectivity. And I think where Calcutta has really shown an example is how to regenerate this rural-urban linkage. The biggest festival of the city is called Durga Puja. Though it's of Hindu festival, it's no longer a Hindu festival, but it is like a public art festival for 4 days, 4 into 24 hours, where everyone, irrespective of religion or community, they participate. And there are around 10,000 what we call pandals. We've seen some photos, which use the local ICH elements for decoration. And what this generates, it's a revenue of around 15,000 crore Indian rupees, something like 200 billion US dollar. It gives income to around 500,000 people for 6 months. And majority of them are the ICH bearers across the country. So this is a wonderful example of how a city can evolve a sustainable financial model for culture. The other thing which has happened is these cultural spaces, they have created a new kind of enterprise. So we have these pop-up stores, we have a lot of young people doing heritage walks, And these works not only show the urban heritage or the intangible heritage, they also tell the stories of the Armenians who lived there. They tell the stories of how harmony has been always a culture in the city. So, it enhances the quality of the cultural spaces. And these are not necessarily adaptive reuse of heritage space, but even abandoned spaces, like abandoned workshops, abandoned movie theater halls, which are no longer used because nowadays we don't go to a movie hall to see theater anymore. But, this shows how, we can regenerate urban spaces using ICH. The other thing, festivals are extremely important, but in this city, what has happened, there has been a conscious effort to celebrate diversity and pluralism in all the festivals. So this is an example of Sur Jahan. This is a festival which we started in the city around 10 years back, and now the festival travels to Kolkata, to Goa. This year it's traveling to Jaipur. And I think 30 countries have so far participated. But what it does, it creates a platform for interaction and capacity building of the young generation who gets exposure, and festival directors from across the world come here and invite, tradition bearers, modern creative artists to the festival. Now, what can NGOs do? So I'll share another example of a young organization who have started Chitpur Craft Collective. This Chitpur is a very old road where, there are diverse communities, and there's a lot of ICH practices, which in modern context perhaps would have died. But this organization, Hamdasti, they revived things like these oud cuts, and then there are communities and how, you can use calligraphy, or even there's a Chinatown, and how you can learn making dumplings. There are Tibetan communities. So this project, what has resulted is, enlivening of the area, and most importantly, creating consciousness among the local governance on the historical importance. Now, I'll take just a few seconds more. Often when we talk of ICH cities, we think of tourism. But I think we need to realize that we don't need to do anything for tourism, but if we do it for the community, the tourists will come anyway. And another thing which a city offers is use of technology. Some of the examples have already been shared, but I'll just share this example of this boy who, is a musician and he's blind, and he runs an internet radio station which showcases, traditional music, and he's a follower of 1 million or something. So, we have this enormous globalized world which a city offers, and using these strategies, what happens? We make the city as a pillar of development, sustains ICH not only in the city, but in the hinterland, and, we can also address things like, unsafe migration and things like that. I'll end with that since the time is over, and thanks once more.
Thank you very, very much for your rich presentation. Also mentioning tourism, perhaps one of the future topics during one of these conferences. So, the last one to speak before the wrap-up is Guy Leons from Burkina Faso. And he was also there, by the way, in Singapore during this conference in Singapore about the same topic. So, but he has a different presentation, I think, than the one in Singapore. So I give him the floor.
Okay, thank you. It will be easy for me in French because English is not very easy, but let us try. How can I?
Green.
Where is it?
No, that's green.
No, this
okay, sorry. Okay. I start by a nice picture. Do you see the ladies? I said that it is ICA in African city, or in Ouagadougou, I will say. The white side, I will say that is for African European. What is their characteristics is mean that at home, most of the time they used to speak French. They used to listen Mozart and so forth. Their children has as name Alexandro, Abdelaziz. It is most of the time Arabic or Europe Occidental names. That is the main characteristic of this kind of person. As you can see, they look like, they are like cats. But when they are looking themselves in a mirror, they used to see a tiger. But the main problem is that one African proverb used to say that the lack of wood as stay as so long in a merry-go, it will never become a cayman. That's why the white one is not really white, but it's métis, because we have it. They are not really European, they are not really African, but they are in the middle. In the second side, we have the African. Most of them, they used to speak our mother tongues. It can be Jula, More, and so forth. The name of the children, it is in our mother tongue, you say Laoko, Laopan, Wen, Kuni, and so forth. And for this person also, I will take the case of the cat again. When they look at the mirror, it is a kind of cat, but the most problem is that their ICA is in trouble because the context is not don't allow them to improve really what they want to do. I will just show some picture because we don't have a lot of time. So, for instance, when we take the architectural knowledge, do you see in the center, at the left side, you have a European style, and in the right side, you have African knowledge. So we have local materials who is used in the right side, and in the left side, you have parpin, you have root tooling. So do you see how is it? That is the way that we are living ICH in our cities. The second is about we have one presentation tomorrow on food. Do you see that is our traditional way to cook, and that is how we are also eating. It means that we used to eat together, we used to eat with hands. That is the traditional. When you are going to the Sabbath, that is the way how people are eating. But when you go in the center, do you see they don't cook again with wood, but it is on gas that they used to cook. And also, when they are eating, they used to, disease are served with a cover. So do you see there is a very gap between the suburb and the center of the city. The last example, because we don't have a lot of time, we have the dance. For instance, at left, we have our modern stage. Do you know, in our traditional way to dance, the stage is all-time circular, but in cities, most of the time there are only quadrangular. So we have for the person who are still in the suburb, they are circular, and for the person who are in the center, they are used to dance in the quadrangular stage. So that is what I want to share with you, because I thought we only have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and it leaves us some time to the question and answering session, and of this Kirksian we're taken care of. And of course, you have already posted your questions on the internet, and this is of course the advantage of using Pigeonhole. And so I give you the opportunity to make some concluding remarks and sharing us these questions and answers.
Yes, maybe we have some time to answer some of the questions, but maybe before we go into the questions posed in the Pigeonhole, just want to give maybe the opportunity for anyone in the audience who has a question and wishes to use the mic. Can you, anyone wishes to do that, just raise your hands. If not, oh yes, the gentleman, Robert.
I think you must press the button of your microphone. Oh, it doesn't work?
Can the technicians help out? I think the microphone on the participants' desk isn't working.
Robert, if you don't mind, we will move to another question first. We'll come back to you in a short while. Maybe we'll go to the pigeonhole question first while they sort out the technical issues. So I guess we can ask the top question: how can an NGO reach an equilibrium between urban context and safeguarding of ICH? Does any one of the panel members wish to share?
I can. It works.
Well, Lisa, you want to share something from your experience?
I did share some examples of how NGOs can create walks and awareness, and there were examples of social media. So I shared those examples of the urban ICH bearers, how through walks and through different activities, they are being connected to young people particularly. So lots of workshops are happening. I think workshops, walks are two good tools, and of course social media.
Okay, Robert, you're on the floor.
Oh, thank you. My question is about ICH, which is practiced not specifically among ethnic groups, but by many different groups within the population, like children's street games or other kinds of forums, whether in your work you've explored that, and also about creolization, traditions that have developed because of the interaction and relationships between different ethnic groups and cultural groups, and have emerged distinctively. So in Colombia, for example, there's sancocho, and there are also examples, I think, in Singapore of Peranakan food. So maybe there could be some discussion about whether this has been explored, the urban culture that's not just specific to ethnic groups.
Does anyone from the group want to take this question? Colombia, there was an example cited. Maybe you want to share?
Well, to this question or to the whole questions we have? Robert's question? Okay, yeah, well, actually, this has been for us a big issue because we do believe ICH is not only for ethnic groups, it's for communities also. And we have many expressions where we have communities together that are not ethnic groups. So what we try to approach when we think about ICH in urban context, I'm going to reply some questions because I cannot talk about it without replying others, but when we were working on this program, we took all the stakeholders we could gather together from, let's say, communities related to ICH practices, but also we took some social leaders in the cities where we were working. We also work with urban planners in different cities. We also work with also the cultural department in each city, but also with the planners department in each city. We also work with different groups that were not identified as ICH, let's say, involved communities, but they were also working in cultural rights in each city, for example. We work also with young people, very much with young people, but also with elderly communities. So we could gather different stakeholders. We also talk sometimes with private sector. So we were trying to gather like different stakeholders involved in this. Actually, we didn't want to take it from the expertise of the experts on ICH. Normally, when we try to work on something, we go to talk to the experts, to the academy. No, we didn't want to involve so much experts or teachers on that. We wanted to involve the people first. And there is where we found something for this ICH in urban context, and is that not always East Asian, is not always related to only ethnic groups. There was something called like the Heritage for the Future or something like this, and it's these kind of expressions that are not old enough now, like they don't have 3 generations for now, for example, but they have been creating some social cohesion and some very strong identities in different cities, and they do consider communities, they do consider this is an ICH expression that for them. And we had a huge debate on how to understand this ICH in urban context when we don't have this ancient or very traditional root of this ICH expression. And other thing that also happened here is that we found sometimes community with no ethnic origins, but also the mix between ethnic groups and communities that are not has an ethnic origin working together. For example, in Bogota, we have like the very famous circuit of the hairdresser stores that are Afro-Colombian hairdresser stores. But now they became part of Bogota, and now they're like places where all people go, not only Afro-descendants go to these places. We also have this traditional cuisine from the Pacific area of the city, where we have lots of Afro-descendant population. But these restaurants in Bogota, and I talk about Bogota because it's mainly the place where you will know in this time you're in Colombia, are not only for Afro-descendants, are for people in Bogota. I mean, they are so important in Bogota that is not, they are already started to mix together with some other kinds of cuisines. And young people, they acknowledge this kind of restaurants as part of Bogota culture. And they are not necessarily Afro-descendant young people. They are just young people in Bogota, wherever they are coming from. So we try to, and this is one of the main challenges for us, is like to not link ICH only for minority ethnic groups, not only in urban context, but in Colombia, for our policy, let's say. For anything we talk about, or anytime we work in ICH, we don't relate it with ethnic groups only. But mainly in cities, we needed to rethink two things. What is the community for an ICH expression, and which is the territory for the ICH expression? Because sometimes in the city, the territory is very different and is linked to another dynamics or understanding of territories, not only to a place itself, or that we can just say, oh, this is happening here in this, let's say, fixed place.
Sorry, Juliana, do you mind wrapping up, because you want to give chance for other questions?
That was all, yeah.
So maybe we take two more questions. Anyone? The gentleman in the front.
Thank you very much. My question is from an African perspective, to say I appreciate the conversation is looking at ICH in urban areas, but in the principle of sustainable development, which seeks to leave no one behind, if we are to nuance the conversation in the context of Africa, we still have to focus on rural areas. So I want to check with my colleague from Burkina Faso the extent to which this conversation from an African perspective should and how can it involve rural communities.
Leonce, over to you.
Okay, well, I will take her as a contribution, and we'll see how we can try to discuss together, and to see if we will have a working group. Amélie is here. Yesterday we sat it, and our discussion we will try to send to the steering committee. Is it okay?
Would you would you prefer to repeat the question, and maybe, yeah?
All right, that's fine. The question is, in Africa, the majority of our people live in rural communities. It's only a few cities such as Johannesburg, Cairo, Abuja, Nigeria, where there are metropoles. So if we are to nuance this conversation in the African context, how can we ensure that we also discuss ICH in rural communities where the majority in Africa are domiciled?
I think that for rural city communities, there is not a very big problem of conservation, safeguarding. I mean that what we have to treat, the treat is a religion That is the most problem. I don't know if I really understood your question, or that someone can help me by translating in French for me, because it will be more easier. But when you speak about Lagos and so forth, that is a metropole, but we have a problem of urbanism in all cities nowadays. Even in village, you know that people, nobody want to have local material for to build. Everyone have to have a how do you say, parping? Oh, I really don't know how I can really answer in English. But le problème essentiel au niveau de, can I answer in French? Okay. Le problème essentiel de la sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel dans un contexte rural, il n'est pas aussi important qu'en ville, pour la simple raison que c'est du patrimoine culturel immatériel que les gens vivent. Et du moment où ils s'en sortent, cela ne pose pas de problème. Mais le gros souci, c'est en ce qui concerne éventuellement les religions. Les religions qui, par exemple, si je prends les danses et autres, qui pensent que, bon, le fait de danser traditionnellement est contre la religion chrétienne ou musulmane. Ou on dira également que parce que je veux devenir moderne, on fera en sorte que, bon, manger à la main n'est pas plus ou moins important. I really don't know if I understood your question. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry for wasting time, but I don't know if I grab really his question, and if someone can help me by translating what he told. I'm very sorry. Susanna, can you help us?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question so well that I could translate it, but I think somebody is offering help over there.
There's a gentleman in front offering to translate.
Yeah, I think there's one simple frame we could use to appreciate the question. Is he was talking about how to nuance, how to harmonize, how to bring together the concept of ICH in the rural area within the spatial culture of the urban area. Now, I will bring another concept. To answer that question, it comes within the context of what you call African cosmology. ICH in Africa involves a very strong foundation. It is built from the cosmology, the worldview of Africans. There's a second concept from where it is built from, ontology, the science of being. How Africans and everything that is within the African cosmology, the worldview, came into being. The average African sees the world and the practices of ICH as involving the visible and the invisible worlds. It involves the material and the immaterial worlds, the living and the dead. The African embodies both worlds in himself. So when he moves from a rural spatial space context, from the village to the urban areas, he carries with him his ICH, the content, the practices, and the way they were built, and the way for preservation. You could say that in Africa today, there is a clash of modernity and tradition. I think that is what we need to appreciate. That clash of modernity and tradition makes it impossible for Africans living in urban areas to practice their ICH. The challenge there is that it didn't start today. There is a colonial context. Africans were living in a natural environment where they were free to practice their intangible cultural heritage for preservation, for sustainable growth, and for development. Now, when they came to the cities, according to the man who asked the question, they had a challenge to survive, economic survival without relying on the ICH. In the villages, they didn't find survival difficult because they used the knowledge of their ICH to survive and to sustain a very standard livelihood. But modern architecture built around cities without the concept of sustainable cities made this very difficult. So what we need to do is to bring in the different contexts of the presentation in which we need to be creative, in which we need to work together and explore the possibilities of technology so that we realize that the African is in the city, but he has not forgotten how the practice of his ICH. He needed to be placed in an environment where this could be done. So I think there's no better way to achieve this once except the marriage of modernity and tradition.
Yes, I think thank you very much for sharing your views. I think it's very important views that we has been shared. I think with that, I think I'll try to just summarize and wrap up the session because we have a very tight schedule. I think the different speakers have shared quite a number of things, but what was common to me I found was, in urban context, ICH is very diverse. I think largely brought about by the large movement of people within the country and also internationally. And there are many links between the physical, tangible heritage, the urban spaces itself, and also how the ICH is conducted. And again, I think many of the speakers also shared various challenges about change, urbanization, physical change in the environment, as well as change in lifestyles of people, and also how do we bridge that divide between the younger generation. But I think the speakers also shared many examples and also opens up more questions for us actually about how ICH can be an important bridge to improve and strengthen social cohesion, bridging communities, addressing issues of segregation, for example. Example of Colombia, which has shared about its toolkit, and I think these are important experiences that many of us will appreciate. I think different speakers also brought about the many different stakeholders. It's not just people who are involved in the ICH or heritage field, but also others outside the field, urban planners, politicians, local government organizations, for example. And I think one of the questions that was posed also, which I find very interesting, is how do we encourage and involve the youth, the next generation, in the safeguarding of ICH in urban context. So I think the presentations open up many questions, and I think have a lot of areas that we need to work on and debate further. What we will be doing is also the speakers will be doing up papers, and you'll be, Albert, correct me if I'm wrong, in the form of an electronic publication that will be posted online. So I think there will be more details. And I think over lunch, we can probably also discuss some of these issues in further detail. And to close, I'd like to just thank the organizing committee for giving us the chance to share on this topic of ICH in urban context, and to thank my fellow speakers for the wonderful presentations and for keeping a very tight schedule this morning. And with that, thank you very much, and pass the floor back to Naila and the steering committee for the next session.
Just let's 5 minutes to continue with the second session. No, it's a coffee break. Yeah, coffee break. Yeah, okay. So please. Everybody can be on time. Like yeah. So sorry, we have a coffee break, but please be on time at 11:30 sharp.
And finally, just a reminder on lunch. Lunch will be at the Hilton Conference Hotel, which is just a 5-minute walk from the center. For those of you who would rather take a bus, there'll be a bus waiting in front of the center that we can take you there and back, but it's actually faster to walk there. The room is actually on the 2nd floor of the Hilton Hotel, Laguna Room. Thank you.
start. Naila. Hello, sorry, we need some assistance regarding the presentation display. Dear colleagues, please can you take your seats? Yeah, I know. Just a second. Can we? Dear colleagues, please take your seats. Albert, Bucholesbe. Thank you. So we are continuing with the second session, and it is our great honor that Secretary of the Convention, Mr. Tim Curtis, is here with us and came to say hello to us. So please, Tim.
Thank you, Naila. Thank you. I haven't come with a fully prepared speech or an intervention, and unfortunately I won't be able to stay with you. As you can imagine, just the day before the committee starts may be the most busy time of year for us in the Secretariat. But I did want to come and just say a few words to support, in a way, to lend our support to the work you're doing. I can see this year's been, we've tried and we've had some important developments on the role of NGOs within the convention. I don't think we've come, and there is a document on that issue for the committee, which I would invite you to look at. I don't think the discussions are over. I think many of you participated in the survey. Some of you came to the meeting we had in Paris. What can I say? I think from our point of view in the Secretariat, it's not like something very clear emerged, but a lot of good discussions happened. And we expect that this issue will continue to be discussed. So we have not come with very concrete proposals at this stage to the committee because we don't feel that we've had enough discussion yet, and we'd like to support more discussions. It's very encouraging to see the agenda you have, which is really agenda items fully in line with what the discussions happening in the convention, and supporting, and we need to find better ways to keep improving, let's say, how we make those synergies between your discussions here and the agenda and the discussions and decisions of the committee. There's a number of important issues coming up in this committee. That is one of them, the role of NGOs, reflection on the role of NGOs. We will also be presenting the new periodic reporting form, which will then be launched next year for the first time in Latin America and Caribbean. And this periodic reporting, we've been working hard to incorporate the overall results framework into the periodic reporting. So this will be unveiled soon, and this, I think, should be of interest to you as NGOs following the convention. It might not be perfect. I think it's a good job. It's a first start, but with all of these things, when we try to put the complexities of lived ICH into numbers and indicators, there'll always be some agreements and disagreements about how you measure what and what you measure. But I think we've done a big job to go from, let's say, 0 to 1, and hopefully over the years we'll be able to improve it and get it more and more refined. So I think that's a very important thing happening at this committee, and a number of other items. You've also, I can see right on the screen now, your next discussion, reflection on the reform of the listing mechanisms. That's also in the beginning phase. And of those of you who've seen the document, I don't think the committee is going to make any big decisions on that at the moment, but there will be a process over the next 3 years, which will be also important. So it's very encouraging to see that as civil society NGOs, you're coming together to discuss that, and we look forward to hearing from what comes out of your discussions. With that, I'd just like to say thank you all for engaging with the convention, for coming here, for doing your work in relation to intangible cultural heritage, and I look forward, and I hope you have some great discussions, and look forward to hearing back. I wish I could stay. Unfortunately, really, it is a busy day for me because we are one day from the committee starting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, I am really honored and I am really pleased to have the possibility to invite you to our common work. It will not be a regular panel, so don't be afraid of a long list of panelists. These are facilitators who have offered their helping hand to our discussion that will come. I would also like to invite Robert to us, so you can all see who will be facilitating which topic. The idea of the panel came actually because of the session, the 13th session that took place in 2018 in Mauritius, where the Intergovernmental Committee launched this global reflection on the listing mechanism of the 2003 Convention, with the support of from the government of Japan. And at the same session, committee requested that the Secretariat continue reflection with accredited NGOs on the definition of their advisory function. And this reflection was initiated even earlier, already in 2017. And the aim of this panel is that we take these two processes together into account and we dedicate our discussion to old and new challenges encountered by diverse bodies and organs of the 2003 Convention, the Committee, the Secretariat, the General Assembly, and Evaluation Body, in relation to the listing mechanisms. So the overall aim is to reflect on the nature and purposes of the lists, representative lists, urgent safeguarding lists, and the register of good practices, as well as on the relevance of the various criteria for some of these mechanisms. And the panel will be focused on the possible enhancement of the methodology for the evaluation and examination of nominations, with reference to the performance of advisory function of accredited NGOs. It is important to note that the concrete ways in which accredited NGOs would fulfill this function have not been identified yet. So it is high time for us to make an attempt to identify our functions and our capabilities. We would like to provide answers to many questions, general questions that are somehow guiding the discussion, but will be split into more specific questions, are how NGOs can best assist the governing bodies of the convention and how NGOs can contribute to solving identified problems in the listing mechanism of the convention. And those of you who are very familiar with the agenda know that there are really huge problems regarding both post-inscription assessment as well as the transfer from the lists. So there are many things that we actually making our discussion grounded in practical, empirically identified situations. At this point, I would also like to thank the Secretariat for a fruitful discussion that took place before the symposium, aimed at finding these three most pertinent issues where NGOs can offer their assistance and their experience and field expertise and engagement in the local context. So, the panel is taking as a framework the listed documents. Of course, the most important document is the convention and operational directives, where Article 9 is talking about the NGOs and where we have paragraph paragraphs in operational directives talking also about the possibility to engage NGOs. So it's a paragraph 96. The three other documents concern the role of accredited NGOs, the reflection on the listing mechanism, as well as the reflection on the participation of NGOs in the implementation of the convention. The first identified problematic area was the advisory functions of NGOs that can be used in pre- or post-inscription monitoring. What is visible that the Secretariat has observed that an increasing trend whereby issues regarding elements inscribed on the list are brought to attention by communities, by NGOs, by individuals and other third parties. However, despite the seriousness of some of these issues raised, there is currently no mechanism in place to guide the Secretariat in bringing such information to the attention of the community. And that is why in 2018 the committee recognized the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements. So this will be one of the topics here. The results of our discussion hopefully will be taken into account during the broader reflection process. Then the second important identified problem is related to the assessment of urgent safeguarding needs. And this has been due to the situation that appeared in 2017 when the committee examined a request submitted by Vietnam to transfer an element from the urgent safeguarding list to the representative list. It was the decision 12-14. And though the decision has been taken on the basis of operational directives that include provisions for the transfer of an element from one list and removal of an element from a list, the evaluation body and consequently the committee felt that neither the available forms nor the operational directives provide an adequate mechanism for dealing with this transfer. And so the committee invited states parties to refrain from submitting requests for the transfer. And the idea of this topic is to discuss how we can help in assessing the urgency and whether the urgency has already finished the urgent situation or not, and how ethical principles may help us in guiding our actions. And the third topic is sharing good safeguarding practices. This is again something very crucial when we discuss the issue related to the register of good practices. Though if you see the evolution of nomination forms for other lists and for other inscriptions, there were some changes. Actually, no changes happened to the register. The register had only one little change related to the criteria, and this amendment was adopted by the third session of the General Assembly and concerned criteria P4 and P5, and they were about the limitation to evaluate the programs, projects, or activities that are already completed, and not to include those that are only at the planning stage. So this was the only actually change that happened regarding the register. And the problem with the register is that there is a very low interest of states to submit nominations to it. We have only 20 nominations, 20 inscriptions to the register, and these concerns were raised on several occasions, both by the committee, the secretariat, and the evaluation body. So there is something wrong with the register, and because there were these troubling issues coming on a regular basis, the committee called to complement the register with alternative and lighter ways of sharing ICH safeguarding practices. And I would like to only show you one thing so that you visualize what are the problems. There is a huge geographical imbalance related to the inscriptions to the register. though the register is taking into account the special needs of developing countries, and one of the most important criteria is that the implemented and nominated and then inscribed elements of good practices will be possibly implemented to the context of developing countries. As we can see, from group 5A and 5B, we have non-inscription. So group 1 is, of course, privileged in that regard, and this may be lead us to some other trends in our discussions, how we can really make it relevant for developing countries. And we will work with the meta-plan technique. So now the boring part is ended, and I hope that you will have some fun. And I will tell you what is the technique. And we will have 6 facilitators. So according to these 3 topics, we identified for all 3 topics 2 important questions. And each of our facilitator will take cardboards, post-its, markers, and will invite those interested in the specific topic to join him or her and to organize our discussion within this technique. So Leonce will take the topic 1A, how monitoring of the nominations for ICH inscriptions look like regarding the pre-inscription monitoring, if there are NGOs in the room who have experiences in the involvement of the process of the selection of some elements to be nominated, and they have some experiences regarding monitoring in pre-inscription phase, please join Leonce. Those interested in assessing the monitoring and monitoring the element after the inscription has happened will join Zugang. And the question will be how monitoring looks like now and how it might be improved. Then we will have Mark Jacobs and Robert Barron helping you to discuss and find some possible recommendations for assessing urgency of safeguarding. Mark will lead group 2A with the question, Robert will lead group 2A with assessment of urgency of safeguarding. How can we use our available experiences or tools to assess whether the element is really in the need of urgent safeguarding, how we can help to assess the urgency. And Mark Jacobs will take the group 2B, how ethical principles may guide actions of NGOs when assessing the need of urgent safeguarding. So those interested in this topic, please follow either Robert or Mark. And then we will have Jorin Nering and Meg Nomgaard facilitating the topic 3 about good practices. Meg will lead the group on the register of good safeguarding practices. She herself had the opportunity to cherish and celebrate the inscription last year in Mauritius, and Jorin will take care and facilitating the discussion about the methods of sharing good practices at international level. Whether there are any existing channels that you use or you know, or we can improve these channels in any way. So what is the meta-plan technique? It is a very useful and widespread technique of guiding the discussion in an organized manner when we have a limited time. So the idea is that you use the cards to express your ideas, and then your interventions are limited per person only to 30 seconds. It is to avoid longer interventions and to make the discussion vibrant. So please, it is not the facilitator's fault or oppressive attitude to anybody talking too long, but please take it into account. But try to be precise, and then the discussion will go very, very lively. We keep cards separately on the cardboards, and we will have 30 minutes after which the group will report to the plenary. So please identify also somebody who would like to report to the plenary about the result of the discussion. So the cardboard will look like that. You will try to first find short answers to the question how it looks like now, then how it should be according to your experiences of NGOs, then why it is not the way it should be, what are the constraints, what are obstacles, barriers, and at the end, so what? So what can we recommend to the Secretariat, to the General Assembly, to the committee, how we can best assist them using our knowledge, experience, capacities. And each group is actually operating according to the same pattern. So this is group 1A, but if you go to group 1B, this is again this different question, but going according the same pattern. How it is now, how it should be, why it is not the way it should be, and so what. And the same goes for 2A and 2B. So we have a very spacious room here, and I think that splitting into 6 groups will be quite easy. I will now ask the facilitators to take cardboards, post-it cards and markers, and to stay for a while here so you can approach the facilitator with the topic you are specifically interested in to discuss, okay? So that will be that. So just maybe once more, if I may remind you what are the topics. I'll come back to these things here. Yeah, so group number 3, Jorin and Meg, regarding the register and the other methods. So those interested, please approach girls. And group number 2, Mark Jacobs and Robert, assessment of urgency and ethical principles. So there is no possibility that somebody will sit in the room and will be allowed to sit not working. So please make up your mind. And then group 1, Leonce and Chugang, reporting functions, pre and post inscription process. Okay, so please make your mind up and join our great facilitators, have fun, and I hope that we meet in 30 minutes. Then we will have still enough time to discuss it in the plenary. So once again, group 1, pre and post inscription. Then group 2, urgency and ethical principles in assessment of the urgency needs. And group 3, Jorin and Meg, about the good safeguarding practices. Those who will not join any group will be charged. So please make your mind up. There are some, fees that are introduced. It is important that we as NGO Forum produce something relevant, so don't hesitate. So those who need to join group number 1, please go to the left corner. Those who want to join group number 2, please find Mark and Robert here on the right. And then group number 3, I think I can see that there is a crowd there, so you should go there. And we meet back in 30 minutes, that is 12:32. Okay, has everybody found its group? I can still see some people in the middle. I see you. So please join the groups and then please find a proper table. Sorry, thank you because I can see that you have already split it around the room. So just for reminding you, this is how the structure on the cardboard should look like. Group 1A, the group 1B, to A, to B, 3A, and 3B. So I will leave one of these structures visible for you. And I will be walking around helping if there is any need. Dear colleagues, we have started a little bit later than planned, but we need to finish at 12:35. So we have 7 minutes more to work. So please go to the recommendation phase. Thank you. Dear colleagues, we need to conclude. So please, last remarks. And please, I would be very happy to invite the rapporteurs for each group to come to the plenary podium. Thank you. I invite group 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, and 3B. Please finish the discussion. Dear colleagues, I hope you might be encouraged by one of the groups that is already ready to present their recommendations. So please join us.
We've hijacked it, Robert.
Sugan, please
give them the last word for
be tough to your group.
Empathy.
Consent. And a lot of tension. Do any of you want to say?
was so strong in our group that we had to...
Because, okay.
Meg, please have no mercy. We finish.
No, I'll give the
I can
floor to
also
everyone.
see that Leonce is still discussing.
Pardon?
Will you do the...
Yeah, I can do this, but you start.
And I'll do the empathy bit.
Okay.
So just...
Should we start?
No. Wait for people.
Who's doing the consent?
Colleagues, we do not want to leave anybody behind, and we want to also appreciate the work that has been done by other groups. So if you may use the remaining 30 seconds to sit and... Okay? We have a volunteering first group led by Mark Jacobs. So I think we will start. The question that the group has regarded the urgency assessment guided by ethical principles. So they will have the floor. I can see that they decided to do it in a collaborative way. So,
I'm doing empathy. You're doing consent.
Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. We had a question: how do ethical principles guide actions of NGOs when assessing the need of urgent safeguarding? And the first idea is we should do it together, and that's why we came as a group. And what we saw is that in the inventory we made a lot of different value systems and different tensions between different groups coincide. And Iago came up with an idea to capture that tension. We'll let him explain.
Yes, we discussed that sometimes people earning their living out of ICH face tensions. And nothing better than our logo here to show the tension between circle, the square, and the triangle. Earlier this morning, we had a beautiful talk about Burkina Faso. So in the village, people dance in the circle, but when they go to the city to present their ICH, they are needed to make the same presentation on a square. So this is a tension, and ICH is always facing this kind of tension, which is beautifully depicted here in our logo.
And in the inventory we made, we identified a number of these tensions, like for instance, how should it be? We should analyze the threatening circumstance in case of emergency, conflict, and so on. But also discussing, for instance, the differences between what a local NGO and what the international NGO could speak about. So we made an inventory of all these possible tensions, and then we came up with a number of recommendations. And basically, it's emphasizing two words. One word that is not yet in the ethical principles, but in the next revision should be. And the other is a concept that is in there. And I will first give the floor to Joanne to explain what word should absolutely be included.
So to bridge the ethical principles with the listing process, the technical side, but also the knowledge and expertise, the word that springs out as a bridging mechanism is empathy. That we have to have empathy in order to work in this field, in order to be successful at the very local and practical level, and bridging to the whole convention process. And empathy it's a very broad word, an umbrella word that encompasses lots of things. It means different things to different people in terms of transparency and feeling and being able to relate and have resonance with practice and people.
What is the other word? Surprise? Yes. The ethical principles include seeking the consent of the people. There should be free, prior, and informed consent of the holders of the ICH. Otherwise, it will be the indigenous people, of which I represent, be excluded from the whole process. So we recommend that there should be, as a matter of fundamental principle, the free, prior, and informed consent of those involved. Thank you.
Then the summative point is to note that when we are empathetic and we consult the communities that we serve, that way we will foster the ethical principle of mutual respect. If people are involved from the beginning, it means they have a sense of belonging, they have a sense of ownership, and they will participate actively in the sustenance of their intangible cultural heritage. And then the last submission is to do an out-of-interest analysis of this emblem, which has three distinct patterns. There is the circle, there is the square, and there's also the triangle. The circle in particular and the triangle speak to eternity, perpetuity, continuity of our various indigenous cultural heritages. At least that is the cosmological interpretation from the third world perspective. Whenever you see people dancing in a circle pattern, it speaks to continuity, eternity. The same applies to the chevron pattern, which again speaks to sustenance of our diverse cultural heritage practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work of the groups. I think they deserve some applause for their work. Thank you so much. And now I see which group is now in the queue? Oh, Robert. So the group 2A.
Okay, we were a small but mighty group, and rather than a collective presentation, they laid it on me. So I'll do the best I can. And thank you, they're great ideas. So the question about how is it now with endangered practices? There's a recognition that globalization impacts the practice of traditions everywhere, that there's a disconnect between what the state's parties might think as constructing heritage and what might be on the local level. So that contributes to a lack of understanding. Few practitioners. There's a situation in many cases where what a tradition is about, what ICH is that it has a function, it has a use, it's practiced for a reason within a community. When it loses its function, it's what, anthropologists have called survival, so it no longer has a function, so that it ceases to have that kind of reason for practice within a community. And there's also a lack of understanding.
Sorry, Robert, for interrupting, but may you present the poster, or somebody from the group can present the poster?
Could somebody from the group kindly come up?
Yeah, please help Robert, because
help
it helps
me, please.
visualize.
Please help me.
Just to...
somebody who's in group 2A, thank you. Okay. And please, if I forget something, help me out. We have 2 people. 2 very well, one for each corner. Let's go. Okay, here we are. Okay, so a lack of practitioners, survival no longer has a function within the community. That there's also the fear of failure. So why would a nation state want to present itself and say this ICH is endangered? So it's a matter of face. And this is a limiting factor, and that's why there are relatively few nominations. Then how should it be that we feel that there should be proactive actions that are taken part in on the part of the Secretariat, on the part of NGOs, creation of awareness through workshops and events, that it's, rather than a sense of failure and shame in having an endangered practice, that it should be a matter of honor to recognize that a nation-state nominator is seeing this as something that's important and wanting to restore and rescue and revitalize the practice. There's also how it should be. They should be taking into account the temporality of a tradition. The traditions change, they're transformed, they adapt over time. And there should be a recognition of this, and thinking about what endangered means. Is something really endangered because it changes over time, or it's practiced in a new context, or it's practiced in an urban area in a different way? There should maybe also be a recognition, we think, that some traditions will die, they'll be discontinued, or they'll be practiced in another way. So more nuanced understanding about the presence of time and traditions. And there's also felt that it should be an important part of the plan of development of NGOs and nation states, that this is something that should be taken into account, that there is ICH that is endangered, and there should be some kind of systematic and strategic way to address this, because this is in the nature of ICH. They change over time, and they're treasured, valued traditions, which are endangered or disappearing. Okay, number 3. Anything I miss? Okay. Why? There's a lack of a definition of the word endangered. What does that mean? And this is something which has not been explicated and explained. It's just there, about traditions in urgent need of safeguarding. So there needs to be some kind of delineation, definition of that. It's not discussed adequately among us. It should open up into our discourse about what endangered, what urgent need of survival involves. And there should be, the why again is a lack of criteria, lack of dissemination of information about your arms. I must be getting tired. Lack of awareness of what the urgent need of safeguarding is. Okay, so what can be done? So solutions include create clear criteria and guidelines so that those who nominate for urgent need of safeguarding know what it means and can follow some sort of set sense of what to look for when something's in urgent need of safeguarding. Have a pathway for communities to address this issue, so deal with it on the local level. It should be a priority for UNESCO because this is in the nature of ICH, that they're treasured traditions that are needing safeguarding. And, you know, we can add also that there's certainly in all of our fields, those of us who worked in folklore, ethnomusicology, ethnology, ICH, heritage studies, know that we want to project the traditions that we deal with as emergent, as dynamic, but at the same time, there are others that are treasured and truly endangered.
Thank you, Robert. I
okay,
think
three more quick things. I was quicker than the last group. We're almost there. Ease up on the guidelines, so limitations on the number of files. So on the other hand, should it be expansive, should it be limited? So we weren't, and also involve young people in the safeguarding tradition. I am finished, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Robert. Applause for the whole group. It was a difficult task, but I think you have spotted exactly the problems. And
I hand
now,
the mic over.
The group that has been discussing the question of the register. Meg, please. Huh? Sorry, I thought it's Meg. Leonce. Okay, Leonce, if you are ready, let's go, and then Meg will be a little bit later. Thank you for your patience, Meg.
Hello, everyone. So it's about prayer inscription. How it looks like now. It looks very differently in different countries. We have the countries where NGO are fully involved. They consult, they provide expertise for the state parties. At the same time, we have the countries where NGOs are fully excluded. They do not participate at all, and ultimately, these inscriptions of this country or nominations of this country look pretty weak. We have the countries where NGO partly involved, partly excluded, and there are some historical and political reasons behind of that. So the situation is very diverse here.
What should be? 3 conclusions, very briefly. First conclusion, involvement of communities should be increased, and the decision related to denominations must be community-based. Second conclusion, NGOs should be more help with capacity building related with this monitoring process. And third conclusion, consultation with the NGOs in monitoring process is essential in every country.
Yes, one of our main recommendations and observations came from the fact that NGOs themselves don't always have the capacity to be part of the process. So our main recommendation was to develop the capacities of NGOs in participating in this process. The lines run straight through the areas of discussion, but the main fact is that it is a prevailing opinion that they need training as well to be more responsive to the processes.
For many problems, it can be a solution. Steering committee should be more stronger, and accredited NGO should be more active at UNESCO, and also UNESCO should promote ICH NGO more at all countries.
Yeah, and also there should be a policy to involve accredited NGOs in pre-inscription process.
Thank you so much. These are very useful recommendations. The group was very big, and they had really invented a lot of ideas, but they managed to be very brief. Thank you for this, and I invite now Meg and the group that was discussing the issues. No, sorry, no? Just wait, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry, Meg. But it's not that... Okay, now Meg, sorry, we keep
so
gender
eager.
balance. Yes, we keep gender balance. So Meg and Chugang, if you can wait for a while, that would be great. These are different, no, we are not listening.
I can do it.
No?
Later you need to
I'm
speak.
completely out
So I'm
of
very proud to present our result
the result of our intensive discussion. So everybody from our group, please join us here on the stage. Okay, Martin? So I will say something very briefly about my opinion toward our discussion. Because in my opinion, that in the reporting process, it should be more inclusive and invite more stakeholders to be involved in the process. And I think we should provide more instrumental support to the reporting system to revise the operational directive, for example. And maybe we can encourage the state party to provide more support to the NGOs and to the communities, groups, and individuals concerned.
So, question one? Okay. So, question one? Okay. So, how is it right now? What we all agreed is in one word, is inconsequential, is who cares? Nobody pays attention to the report. It has really no consequence, what's been written. In terms of what should be done, the report should include a multi-stakeholder reporting, and it should be to the benefit of communities. Why is it this way? Because at this point, it's a state-led reporting process that requires no necessarily involvement of communities in the process. And in recommendations, I'll give the word to several of our members, but one of it is to include the NGOs in the community in the reporting process. That's one.
And well, also to change the perception of the report as something beneficial to communities, to share their experience, to share good practices, to address challenges.
And one of our conclusions was that it has not been important so far, so we should make it important, this monitoring process after the inscription. It's maybe the first thing.
Well, I would add that following our yesterday discussion, that apart from more involvement of communities and NGOs in the present reporting system, I also think that it's good for us as a forum to start in parallel the reporting, especially on the relationship between communities and NGOs, and in such a way actually to make a report which will be beneficial for us in terms of identifying like what doesn't function well, you know, in our own work, and to improve it. So make report, let's say for the next year, for the Latin America, based on overall results framework, working primarily with NGOs in the region, NGOs who were involved in these inscriptions, and communities, of course, which are involved.
Well, perhaps just to summarize, so our conclusion was, okay, now the system has no relevance for anyone whatsoever. No one cares about these reports. And of course you should turn it into something positive. And we strongly feel that it's in the spirit of the convention that the community should benefit from it. So if you are evaluating a safeguarding plan, for instance, and the safeguarding measures, then you should also involve the communities and tell them, okay, well, these are the results. How can we work on this? And so this would be more in the spirit of the convention, I think.
Okay, I think this is a really great recommendation for Riens. Thank you so much. This is why we are doing this work now, just to raise the attention that these are really pertinent issues and problems. So thank you, and now I do not dare to say who is going to speak now. I just leave it to the floor.
Finally.
So our question was how register of good safeguarding practice function now, and how it looks like right now, according to our opinion, is that it's not visible enough, not presented as important to the states, and it's complicated to fill in the form. Two of us here on the stage has really worked on filling in a form, and trust us when we say it's harder than to fill in a form for the representative list. It can really drive you mad. On the second question, which is how it should be, we said it should be more clear instructions when you fill in the form, because it's really tricky. There should be more focus on this register overall, and also more communicated. We don't talk so much about it. It should be more focused and communicated around this register.
Okay, so why is it not the way it should be? So it is quite a difficult question, but we all agree that it is because it is not attractive, as we already said. It is always secondary in relation to the lists, and it is concentrated on the whole system is concentrated more on the elements than on the safeguarding processes. So in order to change this, so the recommendations would be to work on capacity building, to work on networking of, to make easier the process. So to have people that have already this experience networking with other countries and helping the process to be easier, or to have the criteria more concrete or less criteria.
I think that this question of networking was very important in our group, and the question also to build a network between the good practices, because if we really want to arrive to share good safeguarding practices, it's not with an inscription on the register, but we have to highlight this network of good safeguarding practice around the world. Then also in the website of the convention to put a space of sharing experience and sharing like a monitoring system.
I just wanted to add that it relates really to the report as well. It is really important to make it important, that the register is a really important mechanism to popularize it, to show countries how to work, and we really believe it is the future of the convention.
Especially when the convention has the word safeguarding in it, and this register really shows good example of safeguarding. And we were also discussing why is it not so popular? Has it been a change when we changed the name? Before it was best, now it's good. Is that why it's not attracted to states? We don't have the answer. It was just a question. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And the last group was the biggest one and the most challenging, so really like, I really appreciate the work that has been done, and I hope that out of this big group there will be some helping hands regarding,
They're already there.
Okay, okay, great.
Okay, it was a challenge. I think we were more than 40, so the method was not working for us. Forgive me if my presentation, I will do it in a modest way, will be an interpretation of the many inputs that we gathered. But I think this is actually something we should be very happy about. And that is already the first lesson learned. Such a huge interest that was shown for this question of how other methods of internationally sharing good practices look like. the as-is situation, you can see it, the many yellow post-its that are there. There is so much happening already out there in the field on the ways the NGOs and others, like Category 2 centers and so on, are already trying to find ways to share good safeguarding practices. Just to name a few, of course, there's the Heritage Alive initiative in the forum itself. There's a lot of databases, often in a regional approach, where safeguarding experience are being shared. One example is the one on the Nordic good safeguarding sharing. There is a lot of publications, conferences, and so on that are happening all the time, and which we should not forget that, of course, this is also a good method, and we are organizing so many conferences and events ourselves already in the forum and out there. There is the new initiative of the Jeonju Prize given for on an international level for good safeguarding practices. A lot of examples came of online museums which focus on sharing safeguarding practices in a good way also. What else? I think one that was interesting and which mostly came from African colleagues is that, and it is in line with one of the suggestions of the last years, is that we can also learn from the practices itself that are in the heritage practice. So that, for example, through performances, through educational initiatives, this can also be ways of sharing the methodologies actually of the good sharing practices. These are just a few. What we learned from it on how it should be, and there is many suggestions on how it can be better than what is already happening now, because one of the lessons we saw is that a lot is happening, but it's not linked, it's not connected. Very often people don't find a way towards it. So there remains a lot to be done. On the one hand, on the level of efficiency, of clustering, of forming platforms, promote the things that exist and make people find their way to it being shared. And on the one hand, the forum could be more active around this topic, was suggested, but also the Secretariat was actually requested to be more active around this topic, which has indeed been on the agenda for several years. Why is it not happening? There the analysis was that there's a question of course, on the institutional level of resources, of who is taking this coordination, who is taking this kind of initiative. It's somewhere hanging there. Will the NGO Forum do it? Will the Secretariat do it? Is it spread all over? So these kind of questions were there, but also questions of translation. On which level do you translate a good practice? There was a real appeal, a real call to keep it practical, to have workshops really very operational, and to keep the feeling of people talking together, acting together, sharing their safeguarding practice in a very operational way. So not only to find a way toward digital things, but also to keep it very between people and share the practices that we have in our hands and in our minds. And of course, it's a question of networks. It's happening all over, but these networks can be organized in a more effective way. So then the recommendations. I have one personal one. It was a challenge to moderate this group, but seeing this enthusiasm, my proposal would be use this enthusiasm and go with that. But the recommendations that I could learn from, we couldn't do this exercise anymore, so this is an interpretation, is we should cluster what exists already. We should use the networks that exist already and bring them together. There was the call for exchange and training. Training on the one hand on the more methodological level, but also on the very practical level. There is a call for coordination, so let's go with that and start with it. Also a call to combine approaches. Some people are more tending to work together in the region, others are more tending to work together around a specific topic. Like there was the example of CIOF that has an annual, actually on the conference, an annual conference where they gather together around the sharing of good safeguarding practice in their very specific topic. So combine these different approaches of sharing the practices, and education has been repeated very much. Also to have it really in curricula, integrated, and see how we can develop that in an international way. So the call to the forum and the section was there to cooperate on this. Thank you.
Thank you
Did
so
I
much.
forget something?
Yeah, thank you so much,
No?
Irene. Even if she forgot about anything, we will produce a report summarizing all the recommendations. We will send it back to you for consultation, and we would like to have a written report out of what has been done. I would like to thank you very much for your cooperation, for this lively discussion, and I would like to thank very much my facilitators who took the burden of leading the group, very enthusiastic groups. So thank you, and I hope we can enjoy our lunch now. Thank you.
And thank you, Hannah, for this session.
Hello, Hannah, thank you. This is Gerald from Singapore. I just have a quick reminder on the lunch arrangements. So lunch will be held at the Hilton Bogota Hotel, which is just a 5 minutes walk from here. As you go out from the convention center, turn right, you'll see the Hilton right in front of you. Go to the second floor. There'll be a function room where there'll be staff guiding you to the lunch venue. It'll be a buffet dinner, a buffet lunch, and seating will be free seating. So see you there.
And just to, of course, to remind you that after the lunch at 3 o'clock, we have our afternoon session here in the same room. So please be back at 3 o'clock.
Excellent.
DJ AJ. Bogota.